Alright guys, so I'm going to remove this head here, show you how to take the head off, and then also take a look at the pistons that are underneath it. So sometimes people are scared to take heads off. On these LS Vortec platform motors, it's really simple. You know, people say a blown head gasket and they'll sell a truck for cheap. Snatch that thing up. This is an easy job. You can knock it out pretty quickly, as long as you've got all the tools, which it's really basic stuff. And a breaker bar. You don't really want to use impacts on this aluminum stuff if you don't have to, but the breaker bar for sure, the ugga bar as I like to call it. You got 15 total. You got 5 across the top that are 10 millimeter. You got 5 inside the head here, and then 5 along the bottom to take off there. So 15 total. When you torque them back down, make sure you look that up. There's a certain sequence you want to follow to try to keep the head as level as possible when putting it back down. So that way you're not getting it all out of level. That tends to blow head gaskets the soonest. So I'm going to pause this. All I'm going to be doing is loosening them up. These 15 bolts, which can take a while. They got pretty long threads, so you don't want to see all that. So I'll get back whenever I get this all taken off and loosened up. Alright, so the one downfall, you guys watching this, that I've done this before that I didn't cover, that makes these a little bit of a pain, but still not bad at all. You just want to make sure that you remember where the springs came out of if you're going to reuse these rockers too, as much as possible. So if you have a grease marker, you can mark them. But to get to these head bolts more easily, it'll make this quicker still. You got to pull the rockers off. So that's an 8 millimeter here on these. So if you got a grease marker, mark which one they came from. So you can do like a 1I for intake, 1E for exhaust, which these are easy to tell which is which on there. That way that you keep them in the same order. And try to, like I said, if you're reusing springs, which that's usually pretty easy and somewhat cheap swap out if you're going to be putting any kind of cam, you do want to upgrade springs and get trunnion upgrade kits for the rockers. That's stuff we can go over later as well. But anytime you're going to be upgrading cam or anything, you always want to upgrade these components with it, which is pretty easy to do. So get these out, access the other bolts, and I'll show you that as soon as we get these out of here. Alright, one other quick check you can do once you get this opened up is check your push rods. Make sure you don't have any that are severely bent. That would lead to big issues. So other than these being a little dirty where they're supposed to be, these have holes in them. So I don't know if you can see those very well or not, but oil actually is supposed to pass up through these to help feed oil into the valve train. So they're going to be obviously dirty from that. No major concerns on those, at least upon initial look. I got a few more bolts here that I got to take out, and then we'll pop this bad boy off. Alright, one last head bolt to get out. Contrary to what some people will say, if you're doing a real low-end budget build, you're keeping everything stock, you're not going to be pushing a lot of high RPM, a lot of horsepower, you can reuse head bolts. The main thing you want to look at is the threads to see if there's any deformations, anything, the threads are stretched, which you'll see there's a wider gap in between the threads than in other parts of it. Also depends on the motor. This one, the guy said the truck had 170,000 miles on it. I'd probably buy head bolts with that many miles on them. ARP bolts, which are, you know, very well known, very high strength, about $100 for a full set, so not awful even on a budget build. But again, it depends on what you're after, what your budget is. If you've got to get something back together quick, you can. It's obviously not everybody recommends that, but it depends on what you're after. Now, if you're taking this thing apart and you're definitely doing performance mods on it, you're going to be revving higher RPMs, 100%. You need to change your head bolts. But the other thing I do is I keep these things. These things are, you know, I don't know exactly what the grade is on them. I apologize. I know somebody does. I'm not a bolt master here, but they're high strength bolts. So I keep them, and if there's something else that I can put them in, you know, I'll do that. So don't just throw these things out. You go to buy these bolts. Some of these things are $4 and $5 a piece at a hardware store. If you need some bigger bolts, high strength bolts, so keep them and use them for somewhere else on the truck or somewhere else in a project, you know, another project. All right, let's see how easy she wants to come out here. Okay. So the underside of the head, you got your intake and exhaust valves there. A lot of carbon buildup in this. This thing was definitely burning oil. The spark plugs were pretty rough, black, a lot of carbon buildup, ton of carbon buildup here in the cylinder. But these will clean up. Nice factory rectangle port heads. Set this out of the way. Nice head gasket. So this is a multi-layer GM factory stuff's actually pretty good. This one is pretty well junk, falling apart. Here's our lifters and the lifter trays down in there. The common problems that you hear about with the LS and Vortec motors from the Gen 4s mostly, especially those with the AFM. This one should not have AFM in it. You can see all the buildup inside these cylinders here. Grab. Yeah, nice tape. My solo production here. So yeah, this did not have a great life per se, especially towards the end there. But again, for what I'm looking at, this no big deal for me. This block's going to get bored out, and new pistons, new rods, pretty much everything, everything except the block. So I'm not too concerned with what I'm seeing here. But again, we could tell by cranking this thing over that it wasn't great. This wouldn't be one that I would just slap into another truck without knowing that there's some work that had to be done to it. So, but that's what we got. That's the heads. Again, if you're out there and you see somebody has a Vortec or an LS motor that says blown heads and they don't want it, they want to get rid of it cheap because they're scared because of a blown head gasket, it's not that hard of a job. You know, obviously this is out of the truck and I had intake off and stuff off ahead of time, but you can generally get to this point if on your first time never having done this, generally within an hour or two max. It's pretty simple to do to get down to this point. So, and then you just get a nice new gasket, which again for both sides, maybe $100 for the nice multi-layer set that can take quite a bit of power, honestly. Nice LS9 or another type of multi-layer gasket, but the LS9s are the best known gaskets that there are to throw in there and put everything back together. You know, a weekend at most, you could have that motor fixed and run it again in whatever project you want to throw that thing in, and maybe flip it if that's what you're after. So that's this 6.0 motor torn down, the one head off anyway, and just quick down and dirt on how to get that stuff done.